The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. Betrayal by the Kufans set this moon on its course, calling out for their guide. Treachery with no remorse, Muslim and his sons. What a tragedy, oh what calamity. The moon bleeds to foresee, the moon bleeds to foresee. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. On the 9th it heard the prayers of those pure souls, fought the rising sun for. Perhaps this could be its role. Akbar's azan so clear, this moon filled with fear. How will it possibly arise and see the state of those dear, and see the state of those dear? The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. It saw the 6-month infant, no water but an arrow. That night it shone its light on, Rabab filled with such sorrow. To see my asghar I crave, I hear nothing but his cries. Oh son, please do not arise, and with this mother sympathize, and with this mother sympathize. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. Witnessed it the trampling on Sham-e-Ghariba, saw that night the terror, bodies scattered afar, tents looted and on fire, earrings snatched from Ruqayyah. This moon also in such pains, this household bound in chains, this household bound in chains. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. From this month my baby had to wander veilless, Zahra's grave is restless for her daughter princess, the cloak of purity. For this mother so holy, the beloved of Fatima, paraded in the bazaar, paraded in the bazaar. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come, the crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما وصل على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters, I'm so impressed. So more of you are coming on time, mashallah, right? I think we're getting there. Thank you all for being on time. We'll begin our program here with the recitation of the Quran, and today we are going to begin with Surah Baqarah. Brother Kareem.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن ألف لام ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون في قلوبهم مرض زادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا صدق الله العليم العظيم.
Name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. Alif Lam Mim. This is the scripture in which there is no doubt, containing guidance for those who are mindful of God, believe in the unseen, keep up with prayer, and give out of what we have provided for them. Those who believe in the revelation sent down to you, Muhammad, and in what was sent before you, those who have firm faith in the hereafter. Such people are following their Lord's guidance, and it is they who will prosper. As for those who disbelieve, it makes no difference whether you warn them or not. They will not believe. God has sealed their hearts and their ears, and their eyes are covered. They will have great torment. Some people say, believe in God and the last day, when really they do not believe. They seek to deceive God and the believers, but they only deceive themselves, though they do not realize it. There is a disease in their hearts, to which God has added more agonizing torment awaits them for their persistent lying.
Thank you, Brother Kareem and Sister Rabina. I request Brother Mansoor to come forward here and lead in the recitation of the Marthiya chosen for tonight. Please welcome them with Salawat.
Muhammad Ali Muhammad Bulantar Salawat. शेरे नयस्ताने हैदर शेर नयस्ताने हैदर देती थी सदा ज़ैनब रोकर शेर नयस्ताने हैदर अब्बास क्या इसी दिन के लिए मांगी थी बाबा ने दुआ आके परदेस में हो जाओगे तुम हमसे जुदा और सोते हो चैन से दरिया के किनारे भैया क्या सुनाई नहीं देती तुम्हें हलमिन की सदा अब्बास तन्हा है खड़े रन में सरवर अब्बास है शेर नयस्ताने हैदर अब्बास है मेरे शेर जवान ए मेरे भाई हो कहाँ, वो शाख है दिल पे मेरे, तेरी जुदाई हो कहाँ, और देर से देती हूँ भैया मैं दुहाई हो कहाँ, लुटती है फातिमा ज़हरा की कमाई हो कहाँ, अब्बा खंजर है हल्के सरवर पर, अब्बा है शेर नयस्ताने हैदर, अब्बा और क्या इसी दिन के लिए साथ बहन थी आई, आ गई नींद जो दरिया की तराई पाई, फिर पलट कर हमें सूरत भी नहीं दिखलाई, आ गया रंग से अलम तुम नहीं आए भाई, अब्बा फटता है मेरा सदमे से जिगर, अब्बास है शेर नयस्ताने हैदर, अब्बास ओ गिर के घोड़े से सदा बाप को अकबर ने जो दी, दिल बरे फातिमा की अजब हालत थी, हाथ मलते थे कभी घाट को तकते थे कभी, थाम कर टूटी कमर कहते थे फर्जंद नबी, अब्बास लाऊं कैसे लाशे अकबर, अब्बास है शेर नयस्ताने हैदर, अब्बास हाल शबीर का अब तो नहीं देखा जाता, है कमर खम नहीं आंखों से सुझाई देता, ये ज़ईफ़ी ये जवान लाल का सदमा भैया, थाम लो बढ़ के जरा हाथ तुम ही भाई का, अब्बा खाते हैं ठोकर पर ठोकर, अब्बा है शेर नयस्ताने हैदर, अब्बा देती थी सदा ज़ैनब रो कर पर मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद बुलंद सलाम। I would like to request Ali Abbas to down. Salam. Abbas कहाँ हो, Abbas कहाँ कहते थे शायद मेरे अब्बास कहाँ हो, अब्बास कहाँ हो, अब्बास कहाँ तन्हा हूँ करा दश्ते बला में बरादर देखो जरा कर, देखो जरा कर पाला था जिन्हें नाजों से सोते हैं कहाँ वो, अब्बास कहाँ हो, अब्बास कहाँ दिखता नहीं अब आँखों से हर सुए अंधेरा दम रुकता है मेरा, दम रुकता है मेरा देता है सदे अली अकबर मेरा मुझको, अब्बास कहाँ हो, अब्बास कहाँ हो सीने में जवान लाल के पर्ची की यानी है हर राती जानी है, हर राती जानी जा हुआ पर्ची में नाक भर का जिगर हो, अब्बास कहाँ हो, अब्बास कहाँ सीने से सिना खींच के अकबर के सराहने इस दश्ते बला में, इस दश्ते बला में तकता हूँ बस याद से दम तोड़ते उसको, अब्बास कहाँ हो, अब्बास कहाँ हाथों पे उगलता है लहू असगर बेशी गर्दन पे लगाती, गर्दन पे लगाती क्या कह के तसल्ली दूं दर पे खड़ी माँ को, अब्बास कहाँ हो, अब्बास कहाँ हो कहते थे शायद अल्लाह।
Thank you, Alibas. Thank you, Brother Mansoor. Once again, welcome to our program here on the eve of 8th of Muharram. Just reminders that tonight, after the Salaat al-Maghrib, we will have an extended Q&A session with our guest speaker. And we'll also have another session tomorrow. If there's any topics that he has raised on which you would like to receive some clarifications, then there will be a good time to engage with him tonight or tomorrow. Our program for Ashura will be at 11 in the morning, starting with Amali Ashura, followed by Salaat al-Dhuhrain. Then we'll have the Maqtal at about 2 p.m. Then we will adjourn at about 4. The latest majlis will be at 5 p.m. Shami Gariba program will be 8:45. Once again, brothers and sisters, we appeal to you for your support for the modern programs, also for helping us cover the cost of the repairs. I mentioned to you that we had to go through extensive roof repairs, about $40,000, and we still are not done yet. We need to fix the electrical system. In fact, also the audio-video system is actually showing its age. All the projectors we have need to be renewed. So there's a fair amount of expense we have, and it's about 14 years since we had built the center. These things are showing the age now. So we'll actually appeal to you. You can make donations for general donations or the Muharram program or the Tabarruk or the roof repairs, whatever you want, please, it would be very much appreciated. So with this, I request our speaker, Sayyid Kirmani, to address us for tonight. Please welcome him with salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والأمر إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على رسول المسدد مصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة لساني يفقهوا ما بعد. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters, youngsters, and Islam and Imam here in Seattle or across the globe, Assalamu alaikum jamia. Question: what is the problem of evil? We've been discussing the future of our community, and in that we've been discussing a series of different topics. And how is it that the movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam can help us get to an environment where the future of our community nationally and globally is vibrant, strong, and robust? One where our next generation are better Muslims than us. Our next generation are more practicing than us. They have stronger belief than us. And in this movement, you will find that there are many blessings in this movement. In fact, I would argue that when you come to the West or Western philosophical countries, meaning, for example, the United States and Canada, but also Australia, although Australia is geographically in the East, it's Western philosophically, you'll find many Muslims who actually believe knowing why they believe. There are many people who believe with this istidlal and they question why they believe, and having searched for the answers, they now believe. And that's a richer form of belief as opposed to just inheriting belief. Now, there are people who have inherited it, but they also go on a quest. So it's not always black and white. And you'll see, especially tonight, that there is some distinguishing factors. So our common goal, all of us, I hope and I believe, is that we want a vibrant community in the future. That is where people feel that they have a sense of ownership, belonging, skin in the game in the mosque and the Imam Bargah. And this pain that I feel, many of you feel, and I feel that people, especially the older generation who's put so much blood, sweat, and tears into building these institutions, are like, well, why am I the only one who's doing this? Or why are only a few of us doing this? And where's everyone else to help? Where's everyone to assist? And so the real question that we have to roll back is, if we were doing this and dealing with this problem in our jobs, in our companies, in our organizations, well, we would clearly say that, look, there's an issue of perceived value here. That is, if people feel that there is a value, they will make sure that they will, for example, vote with their wallet. For example, you go and buy an iPhone. An iPhone, for example, you may go to the iPhone and say, hey, this phone is so nice, it's so brilliant, so great. Do you think you could give it to me for half price? Will they give it to you at the store? They won't. I mean, even students, they give them very meager discounts at Apple, right? I have Apple product myself. I'm not picking on it, but I'm giving an example. That the idea here is that you perceive a value there, so you spend accordingly. So you go, half of our parking lots in all of our jamaats across the US half of them are European cars. Now, European cars oftentimes aren't the most reliable, although that may be changing. But there's a perceived value in your mind for that type of car and that type of vehicle. You pay a premium for that. So the question that comes forward is, what is the perceived value of the mosque, the Imam Bargah, the Husayniyah? And oftentimes the leadership in mosques of Husayniyahs and Imam Bargahs are often saying, well, the Qur'an says this. Or, this is what the Hadith says. This is what the Ahlul Bayt said. And although that may work for you and I, that doesn't work for another generation that didn't grow up in that environment, that didn't have that cultural, religious framework to help give it rise. I told you in the previous nights as well, not because people are bad people, it's just the world that we live in that is critical thinking and open-mindedness and analyze and question everything. That people say, well, hold on a second, how do you know the Quran is the word of the God? And how do you know that that's something that is, as in many people say, harf akhir, like the final statement, that is the end all be all. As in Christianity, they say the gospel truth. Well, many Christian scholars say, well, the Bible was not written by Jesus for sure. We know that for 100%. There's a discussion amongst academics of the Bible, did Jesus even exist? They say, even those same scholars say, we know Muhammad existed. We don't know if Jesus existed. And they'll say that we know that he didn't write the Bible. We know his disciples did, Paul and others. And so they say, well, hold on a second. So you're saying this is the word of God, whereas we know historically that it's not exactly the word of God. And so the same argument comes forward in Islam that, well, hold on a second. And these are questions that we need to start asking and answering. Here's the kicker. Whenever someone asks you a question, you must attempt, especially the younger generation, you must attempt to your best of your ability to answer that question to the satisfaction of the person asking the question, not to your satisfaction as the person answering the question. This is the real issue. That many people in madrasas and Sunday schools, young people who are good thinkers. They're your kids. Why wouldn't they be good thinkers? They ask these brilliant questions, and the person who's answering it, I mean, God bless them, may Allah bless them, but they may not have all the answers to be able to answer them to their satisfaction. So what happens? What's the result of that? The result of that is that there is some gap between the answer that you gave or I gave or we gave and the answer that they were looking for. There's some gap. Now, over time, that gap, it festers in the back and it begins to brew. You know, like coffee, like tea, it brews over time. So that answer, or that element that was not answered, that is left in the background, that continues to brew, eventually it brews so much that it spills over. And that spillover effect manifests itself as agnosticism or atheism or rejection of religion at large. So the real question we should be asking is, how do we get people more connected to the mosque, the Imam Bargah, the Husayniyah? Now comes the issue of usuluddin and furuuddin. Now, we have been discussing this since childhood in our madrasas, our Sunday schools, our institutions like this. But the reality is, does it really seep into our heart what is usuluddin and what is furuuddin? That is usuluddin being the roots of religion and furuuddin being the branches. We often say this, but we repeat it like, myself included, like parrots. So what does it really mean? Let me give you an analogy. In Florida, where I come from, we have these palm trees. You have these brilliant pine trees here, and we don't have them. We have palm trees. And so palm trees are very tall. They can grow very, very tall. But when we have hurricanes every few years in Florida, every 10 years or so, when we have hurricanes, you'll see that if the hurricane is strong enough, the winds will take this very tall palm tree and lift it up out of the ground and take it across town. In fact, if you go to Universal Studios in LA or even in Florida, you will find that there are these trees that are in like Dr. Seuss area and others that are very bent. And you ask, how did this happen? And they'll tell you this happened during the hurricane season. Some of them were totally uprooted and they went across town and Universal bought them and put them in their studio. So why am I telling you this? Take this on one side. Very tall tree, roots may not go very deep. On the flip side, you may find some very short trees that are not very tall, but when winds come, they don't touch the tree because the roots go very deep into the ground. They go very deep and they go very wide. So what ends up happening is as wind comes, nothing happens, it's unaffected. Maybe some of the leaves on the top go away, but eventually the tree comes back to its strength. This was the analogy of Usuluddin Furuddin. Parents everywhere are saying, my son, my daughter, read namaz, read namaz, read namaz, fast, fast, fast. You're dealing with the symptom, you're dealing with the branch. What you need to be focusing on is watering the roots and making sure that people have belief in Tawheed, Adalat, Nubuwat, Imamat, Qayamat, and this notion. Remember, there is taqleed in Furuddin. There's no taqleed in Usuluddin. Yes, you can take scholars' views and take that as a guidance, but ultimately you have to absorb it in your heart. That is, why do I believe in Allah? Why do I believe in Ahlul Bayt? Why do I believe in Islam? You can't go up to God, so to speak, metaphorically, in the next world and say, oh, I believed in Islam and Allah because Ayatollah Sistani. It doesn't work that way. You have to have your own belief as to why you believe in Islam, why you believe in your religion. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations. And that's why I'm saying that for the next generation, we need to have these panel conversations where we have, by the way, I've met community members from our community, nationally and globally, who are, for example, physicists and biologists and people in the very respected in their domain. And they say, we actually have fairly good probabilistic arguments for God and the need of God and all of these things. But oftentimes there's not a platform for them to present it. So what I'm saying is, as our communities are getting more educated, which is phenomenal and fantastic, the caliber of questions is also rising. So you need to look at and consider not the golden rule, but the platinum rule. Remember, the golden rule is often something that you hear throughout life. That is, treat people the way you want to be treated. Whereas I would invite you to consider the platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. Because the way they want to be treated may be very different than the way you want to be treated. For example, I may be very extroverted. I like talking, I may like to talk in a big gathering, whereas someone else may be introverted and they don't want to speak. They don't want the limelight. They don't want you to put all the attention on them. Similarly, when we're running a mosque, Imam Barga was saying, yeah, these things have to come to light. That is, what is the need of my populace? What is the need of that young person who's growing up in Kirkland, who's growing up in Bellevue or Redmond or wherever they're growing up? What is their worldview like? And how is it that I can address their worldview to help address the issues of Tawheed, Adalat, Nubuwat, Imamat, Qayamat? Because if Tawheed, Adalat, Imamat, Qayamat, Nubuwat, all of these things are strong, the Usul al-Din, then there would be no nagging about praying namaz and fasting because people would already have certainty. You wouldn't need to tell them. In fact, they'd probably be telling you. So that's really the issue. We need to be giving solid evidence in dalil. By the way, this is what Sayyid Sistani said in his advice to speakers. Make sure you eradicate people's doubts that they have in their mind with solid proof and evidence. And that's why I've been trying to bring other books, secular works and other things, because believe me, if I call in this hall, Sayyid Sistani and Elon Musk, most of the youth are going to gravitate towards Musk or Bezos or Gates, because that makes my career, that makes my life, that makes my X, Y, and Z. They're not going to gravitate towards Sayyid Sistani, whether you like it or not. And so what I'm telling you is the heroes, the role models, the people that we are aspiring to be like are from that domain. Now, I'm not saying that's anything wrong. What I'm saying is we just need to be intellectually honest to bring all of these pieces of the puzzle together. So now I'm coming to our conversation tonight. One of the biggest reasons that people have left religion in Western philosophical countries, Australia to Canada and everywhere in between, is the question or the problem of evil. And within that, why me? Why do I have to suffer? Why do I have to lose a loved one? Why do I have to go through this illness and this, and the other? Why me? And this has been one of the biggest causes of people leaving Christianity and Judaism and other religions as well. Now, for some people who've grown up in a certain environment, they're shocked by even this argument because they may not have even heard of this argument. Because in certain parts of the world, you don't even consider this. I'll come to that in a moment. There's a big difference in the Western philosophy and the Eastern philosophy on this question of evil. Many people who grew up in the East, whether they're Muslim or not, they never came across this question. This was a question that fundamentally is Christian at heart. And because of that, that's bled over into our society. And people say, hold on, evil exists, suffering exists, people are being harmed and hurt, and poverty exists. That child, why is that child suffering from cancer? What did he do wrong? What did she do wrong? And they say, God knows, and he's not doing anything. Therefore, God does not exist. So this is something that we need to tackle to try to get the conversation going. So we answer these questions so that the next generation knows about these things. By the way, as a side note, why is it so important and pivotal to have this conversation? I'll give you an example. I know many people, quite a few, a handful, of people who were born in Shia households who are now Christian, for example. Many who are Sunni, many who are atheists. It's happening all over the place. And it's happening in every major religion, but we're not immune. I just want to let you know about that. So one of the people that I know who was a very close friend of mine who became Christian, he went to college and one of his roommates was an evangelical Christian. And now what I'm trying to bring to your attention is there's things that you may not be realizing and are not on your radar, but still have an impact on you and your family. What do I mean? So he was someone who was a good practicing believer. By the way, somebody can be a non-Muslim and be a very good person, right? And I hope we all agree on that. But at the same time, this is somebody who was a practicing follower of the Ahlul Bayt and follower of Islam and Shiism, all the wonderful things. But he had a roommate who was an evangelical Christian. Now, if you don't know evangelical Christianity, then you don't know what I'm trying to say. Evangelical Christians have this concept of tabligh and doing very hardcore tabligh, that is converting people, because they believe that the way to salvation is Jesus Christ. And so they train people on how to convert others. So stay with me here. In their communities, what often happens is not only do they give people training on their belief system, they also train them on how to convert others to their faith. On our side, we may not even forget converting other people. We may not even give people training on how to adhere to their own beliefs, stick to their own beliefs. So it's very important that if youth are going off to college, university, they're going to University of Washington, Stanford, or you name the school, that we give them training beforehand and try to really see, do they know about their belief system or not? I'll give you an example, just so the community leaders and wherever my voice is reaching understand. There was a study that was done by a group of researchers from Notre Dame universities and several other universities. That was the largest study on young people and faith in America. Over 2,000 people were part of this study. And they asked them questions about their belief in God. They asked them questions about their belief in religion. And they asked them several questions. And these people, mind you, were people who were practicing, not non-practicing. These are people who are church going and the likes, synagogue going and the likes, mosque going and the likes, not people who had no connection to religion. These were practicing. What did they find? They found 3 themes across all young people in religion in America. Number one, they found that young people who are practicing in America were not able to talk about their religion at depth. They were only able to, for example, what do I mean at depth? They would say that, for example, do you believe in God? Yeah, I believe in God. Or are you Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian. Okay, so what is your belief system? So for us, it would be like someone says, okay, you believe in Islam? Yeah, tell me what is Tawheed? What is Adalat? What is it, Imamat, Qiyamah? But not just the one-liner. Tell me in depth what that really truly means. They found that young people in America could not answer those questions. What is it that it truly meant? What is it truly, the belief system that they adhere to? Number one. There was no depth. There was surface level, number one. Number two, they found, and this should not come as a surprise, but I'll just tell you because the data is there. The second finding was that for young people in America, who are practicing, by the way, religion was just not that important. They found that on the list of priorities in life, there's work, school, friends, social network, and way down the list, if it's on the list, was religion. So religion is not a priority for young people in faith in America. I hope no one's astonished by that. That actions speak louder than words. And so this is what's going on in our phenomena, in our world. Now, remember one thing, one model that is there. The third thing that they found was that the God that young Americans believe in, the practicing ones believe in, is very different than the God that their parents believed in. And the researchers called it moralistic therapeutic deism. Moralistic therapeutic deism, MTD, meaning what? Deism, believing in a God versus not believing in a God, okay? Theistic, moralistic meaning good as opposed to bad, and therapeutic. Therapeutic meaning what? Therapeutic meaning a God, when I need him, he's there on demand, a God of the peripheries. That is, when I need God, he's there for me. But when I don't need him, he's on the sidelines. There's a book that I recommend you read. It's called The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant. All of their books are phenomenal, but this husband and wife are amazing historians, passed away since. Elon Musk, all the big guys read their books. Anyways, when Will Durant was asked, after studying philosophy and history and spending his whole life in dedicating, the interviewer, the person asked him, someone asked him, what is the relationship? If you were to summarize all of the history of religion in the world, what would you say? What is the conclusion that you would give me? The espresso shot conclusion. Okay, well, if you want to know the truth, here's the truth. All of the history of religion can be summarized in the following. And that is, when times are good, religiosity goes down. When times are bad, religiosity goes up. And doesn't the Qur'an tell you and I that? That the reality is, when they're sinking and they're about to go down ship, and they call out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, save me and protect me, Allah delivers them. And as soon as they hit shore, they forget Allah. That's the reality. Why? I keep this point in mind because oftentimes we think that a difficulty, a trial comes in our life, it's something that is to punish us. Whereas in reality, it may not be that at all. It may be to revive us, to bring us back to our center, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, the Qur'an's topic from cover to cover in one word is Tawheed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the oneness of God. Within that is justice. Within that is righteousness. Within that is kindness. Within that is everything. Remember, Imam Hussein alayhi salam went to Karbala to protect Tawheed. Because in Tawheed you find, as a result of Tawheed, the best elements of the world come back. Number one. Number two, remember, if we don't remember anything, remember this. There is a prerequisite to being a Muslim. What do I mean? The same way that if I go to college, I go to university, I take physics 2, I take chemistry 2, I take the whatever subject 2, I need to take the first subject. I need to take either test out of it, pass it to show that I know it, or I take the class. So I either need to take Bio 1 and then Bio 2, Physics 1, then Physics 2, and so on and so forth. Similarly, there is a prerequisite to being a good Muslim. What is the prerequisite to being a Muslim? The prerequisite to being a Muslim is to be a good human. You cannot be a Muslim without being a good human first. It defies logic. Remember, a Muslim is a good human 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. You know, you get the updates on your app, on your phones, 15.6, 15.9 on the Apple or your Windows 6, 7, whatever number they're at. If I'm not a good human being, if I am someone, this contradiction never made sense to me. People who race to the mosque to make it for namaz on time. You're risking people's lives on one side, and you're trying to make it to Salah on the other side. What the reality is, yeah, sure, you should be on time for prayer, no doubt. But the solution is to leave earlier, not to put other people's lives in jeopardy. Similarly, when it comes to this, I cannot, God forbid, strike my child or traumatize my child and make them adhere to Islam. People do this. This essence of understanding, I need to be a good human being first. Then I can be a good Muslim. But we sometimes miss the forest for the tree. That's really the essence. We have a common goal here. And once we iron out these things, more and more people will be, I fundamentally believe, the wealth of Islam, the wealth of the Ahlul Bayt, the wealth of the Quran is such a treasure that if we give it and we share it in the truest form, I believe these mosques will be filled with more non-Muslims than Muslims. The same way that yoga centers and Buddhist temples are filled with more non-Buddhists and more non-Hindus, you will find that these mosques will be more filled. But it requires that we implement it and we share it. And we become the champions for justice for everyone in society, as I was alluding to yesterday, not just me and you. We understand that if something, by the way, you can learn from non-Muslims on this. Now, there are some other things that you may question. By the way, when I take a name, I hope this is clear by now, I'm not validating everything they do. But even the likes of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are coming forward and saying that the tax system in America has been so changed and altered by particular interests of the wealthy That's not fair. And we need to reform it, or at least go back to the original 1917 or era time tax system. You and I have that level of justice that if something is against my bank balance's bottom line, I'll still say it if it's the right thing. That's what Islam aspires. Islam aspires for me to speak up for the Jew, even if there's a Muslim against him. I gave the example of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So that's really what we're after. We're after societal justice in the holistic sense. Islam says, number one, we are all servants of God. We are all one in the eyes of God, first and foremost. Number two, then that means that no one is subservient to another except Allah. So if that's the case, then everyone has a fair shot before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that means that if we don't have societal justice, economically, socially, politically in our world, we have work to do. And we should be at the forefront of those conversations. That is absolutely aligned with Islam. So now comes the issue of young people. I need to see the world from their view. So when these three things that I just described to you about how young people in America who are practicing see the world, religion may not be a priority. They may not be able to speak at depth about their religion. And the form of religion that they follow is the God that they believe in is a God of the peripheries, a God who is there on demand when I need him. That's something we need to be cognizant of, number one. Number two, the second element of the equation is we really need to think about and analyze and try to understand the slogans that were said throughout history so that we are not duped. I gave some examples last night that, for example, the solution to bad guys with guns is good guys with guns. And I said that's just marketing. Or for example, the most important meal of the day is breakfast. That was marketing again. All these types of marketing slogans, marketing, if you're not careful and authentic, it can be very on the edge of lying. And so what ends up happening is these slogans get perpetuated and people start believing them, like austerity. I gave you the example of austerity. It's something that sounds good, but it's not really the reality. Similarly, I want you to think about the following. About 200 years ago, Nietzsche, a philosopher, comes forward and he gives a very famous line, which many people misunderstand. And he says, God is dead. My question to you is this. When Nietzsche said God is dead, did he kill God? Did Nietzsche take a gun and kill God? Or when Nietzsche said it, at that moment, when the words God is dead were written from the pen of Nietzsche, or when he said it, at that moment, did God die? Or was Nietzsche saying, look at people's actions. Look at how people are living in society. Look at what they're doing, and you can tell by their actions that God is dead in their mind. He wasn't. There's a difference between being prescriptive and descriptive. Remember this. Niccolo Machiavelli, who's an advisor to the Medici family in Italy. I've been to Florence. I'm sure many of you have been to Florence. Florence was built by the Medici family. Medici family were the people who were the bankers of the Roman Catholic Church. So they would funnel all the money, all the tithing, all the money that used to come to the Roman Catholic Church. They were the ones who controlled the money in the banking. So the Medici family comes forward and they are these bankers, and the advisor, one of the advisors to them was a guy by the name of Niccolo Machiavelli. He wrote a book called The Prince. The Prince, by the way, still governs much of foreign policy in our world till this day. Over a 500-year-old book, still governs. And what many people don't realize is people say Machiavelli was being prescriptive. He was giving a prescription, you should do this. Whereas in reality, many historians say he was being descriptive. He's just telling it like it is. There's a science of economics and there's a philosophy of economics, as Shaheed Sadr says in his book, Sadhana. Philosophy of economics tells you how things should be. Science of economics tells you things as they are. This is the ground reality. This is what I've been trying to discuss in the past several nights. There's what things should be and there's the ground reality. I know I've been harsh, but I'm trying to present what I believe are the ground realities that people are telling me, not my own views. That's why I'm giving books and some sort of references. And so that doesn't mean I want things to stay this way. I want us to understand it so that we move forward in a manner that is productive for everyone. And these places are vibrant in nature. So now this is one example. So when Nietzsche said this, was he saying that he killed God, or is he saying people's actions are saying? Number one. Number two, another very misunderstood slogan is Karl Marx's slogan, that religion is the opiate of the masses, which he said, but the context often is missing. When Marx, who often people, especially in America, capitalist environments, we are very against him because we're not really attuned to what he actually said. So what did he say? Religion is the opiate of the masses. Now people come forward and say, what he was saying is religion, the problem, get rid of all of religion. That's hence the USSR, hence the Russian movements and communist movements and the likes. But if you ask true scholars of Marxism, they'll tell you that's not exactly what he was saying. What he was saying is that religion is what helps people cope with the difficulties in their life. So at that time, it was religion. But if Marx was alive today, what would he say? Religion is the opiate of the masses, or Netflix is the opiate of the masses, or TikTok is the opiate of the masses. It's just a vehicle. So what he was really getting at is these are things that are helping people cope with their difficulties and their challenges. Similarly, when we come to our young people's worldview, what is it that we need to answer so that they understand what is Islam all about? What is Imam Hussein's movement all about? Is it just to come to cry? Although, by the way, some people, there's a couple of elements that I need to clarify with respect to Imam Hussein alayhi salam's movement. Now, what happened, what didn't happen is a long story in Karbala. And there's a lot of different views among scholars on this. But the reality of the matter is we don't know the extent of what happened. And oftentimes people think maybe these things are exaggerated, maybe they're not. I'll tell you why. I remember maybe 10 to 12 years ago, there was a video, parental discretion is advised, there was a video of a terrorist who was basically eating some more, I won't go into more detail, organs. And I remember seeing that video, many of you may have seen it as well. I didn't sleep for a few nights. But I thought to myself, if people are doing this in the 21st century, what do you think people used to do 1400 years ago? We can't fathom how barbaric they may have been. Number one. Number two, when it comes to, I believe personally that there is a miracle in this commemoration, in this warning, in this crying, because God knows how to keep a message alive. And there's a wisdom behind that. And one element of the equation is that this is what's kept people coming back again and again over and over. I'm not saying we should exaggerate, I'm not saying that at all, but what I'm saying is there's a blessing in that. And there's numerous narrations about the blessing in remembering Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And that is something that we need to remember. There's no limit on the atrocities that people may have committed in the past. At the same time, there's another thing that I heard from, again, I'm about to take a name. And again, this is another name that gets very sensitive in the Iranian community on the other side. People who are not Iranian don't realize it, but the name is Sayyid Hussein Nasr, who's at GW's Professor Emeritus. People who are often very hardline Khomeini followers hate him, and people who really love him are often very hardline haters of the other side. So this is just for context. Not always, there's always exceptions. Anyways, I was in a community and I mentioned his name and people got very upset. So people have a lot of feedback. You know, there's maybe 250 people here, 250 opinions. So you have to manage this from your lecture. Anyways, I'm not mentioning him for the Iranian politics. I don't know anything about that. You guys know more about it. I'm talking about in America, he's considered one of the main academics, whether you like it or not. Anyways, he said that, the Shia community should be appreciative of the commemoration of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. If for nothing else, at least this, that you save hundreds of millions of dollars in therapy costs. That mother or that child who is crying, or that person who is crying and venting their sorrow, they may be crying for their child that they lost. They may be crying for their brother that they lost, their sister that they lost, their parent that they lost. And in our modern society, we don't have vehicles for people to vent and let that pressure out. I remember when I mentioned this, one brother came to me and says, Sayyid, I need to tell you something. There was my nephew, when his parents died, he was complete silence for a year. And the doctor said, you got to get him to cry. And the only vehicle we had to get him to cry was to take him to Majlis Imam Hussein in Muharram, and that's when he was able to cry. And that's when he normalized. So there are things that we don't realize sometimes on the surface level. There's a divine wisdom. You may be reading the Qur'an and thinking they're stories. You may read the Bible, the Christian community may read the Bible and think they're stories, but stories were very important vehicles to get very complicated ideas to people who may not have been educated as we think of it. So Allah knows what He's doing. God knows what He's doing. So it's very important for us to commemorate this and keep this movement alive wherever you are. I mean, think about the power of this. Some of you have moved from other corners of the world and ended up in Seattle, yet you never forgot the Majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That's a power. That's just something there. So now coming to our issue in our conversation tonight, which is the problem of evil. This is something that people have not been able to reconcile in the modern world, and it's been the cause of people throwing out the baby with the bathwater. They say, because evil exists, I'm not going to believe in God. So what's the belief? The belief is, how do you reconcile evil in our world with a God who is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent? Now, I threw three big words at you, but it's very simple. How do you reconcile evil with a God who is all good, all knowing, and all powerful? Meaning, He knows everything, He's all good, And he's all powerful, meaning if he sees suffering, he can stop it. So why does the young child suffer? Why does the young child suffer of cancer? Why does X, Y, and Z suffer? Why is there suffering in our world? Why is there evil in our world? It's a good question. Well, first of all, we need to define evil. What is evil? That's why I'm saying evil parenthetically. What is evil? That's something we need to look at. And what is God's role in this? What does free will and predestination have to do with this? Stay with me. This is an example I hope you keep with you and you simmer on it. You may not digest all right away. But there's a book about 100 years old. It's called Flatland. And Flatland takes you on a philosophical journey of the mind. And Flatland says, imagine yourself in a two-dimensional world. It goes from 0 to upwards, but imagine yourself in this example in a two-dimensional world. Two-dimensional, I don't want to get too mathematical at this time of night, but X and Y plane. You remember the Cartesian plane? Rene Descartes, I think therefore I am, cogito ergo sum. He's also the guy who came up with the Cartesian plane, XY plane as they call it. So he comes forward and the book says, look, there's this Cartesian plane, the XY plane. You're living in a two-dimensional world. We're in a three-dimensional, right? Our world may be more than 3 dimensions, but we can perceive 3 dimensions, right? Or fourth dimension being time, sure, right? So in two-dimensional world, it's a flat screen. So let me give you an example. Imagine you're living in that video game screen of the arcade back in the day. You know, Pac-Man, 2 dimensions, or Tetris. What was that tennis game? You remember that one? So you're in that screen. You're Pac-Man in the screen. You're living in a two-dimensional world. Stay with me. I take my 3-dimensional finger, right? My finger has 3 dimensions, length, width, height, right? Stay with me. I'm trying to answer the question of evil and defining it. Two-dimensional world, Pac-Man. I take my 3-dimensional finger and I put it in the 2-dimensional world. What does Pac-Man see in that 2-dimensional world? What does Pac-Man see? So you're Pac-Man in the 2-dimensional world and you see this goes into, what do you see? Point, someone said a point. That would be 1 dimension. Point is close, but not quite. Line, wall, a line or a wall. You would see a flesh-colored line because you can't see the whole finger because you don't have the 3rd dimension to be able to see it. So what do you call it? What does Pac-Man inside the screen call it? He calls it a line, flesh-colored line. But what is it in reality? It's a finger. Exactly. SubhanAllah. Sometimes the kids are much better with me than anyone. It's a finger. Similarly, what we perceive as evil is exactly like us being in this 3-dimensional world and we don't see all the dimensionality of the reality and we're saying this is evil. I'll give you another example. In the Bible and in the Qur'an. In the Bible, there's a book called, and don't accept this yet, I'm going to give you more dalil, don't worry. In the Bible, there's a book called the Book of Job, who we call Ayub in Arabic and in Islam. The Book of Job. And also in the Quran, you have Surah Al-Kahf, which we've been discussing. In Surah Al-Kahf, the second story that is told is the story of Musa and a wise man, who we call Khidr. Keep these two in mind. So what happens? In the Bible, in the book of Job, J-O-B, it's pronounced Job, it's spelled Job. So you come to that story and Shaitan, or Satan, says, look, this person, Satan meaning the whisperer in Hebrew. As you know, Hebrew and Arabic, they have the same common languages, you know? And so these things, they're both Semitic languages, so they both have commonalities. Anyways, Adam means man, Adam in Hebrew. Anyways, when you come to this, in this conversation, when you come to the book of Job in the Bible, what happens is Satan, or the whisperer, says to God, look, this servant of yours, this prophet of yours, he's only listening to you because you've given him all these blessings. He has a happy life, a happy marriage, a happy, you know, he's wealthy, he's got all these kids, he's got everything's made for him. That's why he's grateful. That's why he's thankful. If you take these away, he won't be. So God begins to take away things one by one. It's a similar narrative with some differences in the Quran, the Islamic narrative. So God takes one thing away, his, you know, his property, and then his children, and then his health, and all of these things. And in the Bible, there's this passage where there is a big dialogue in poetry between the friends of Ayub. The friends of Ayub, they begin to talk to each other. They're not talking to Ayub. They're just looking. Ayub's sitting there on the ground or lying there on the ground in a state of affliction. He's lost everything. He's sick. And his friends come and they start saying to themselves, Ayub must have done something wrong. Job must have done something wrong. God wouldn't punish him otherwise. Don't we still do that in our communities? Someone's going through a difficult time, we play judge, jury, and executioner. Sometimes we play God because, oh, this person did this. This must have been the reason. They must have done something wrong. Whereas God, Allah is saying, no, hold on a second. So they start making allegations and allegations and allegations on Job, Ayub. Eventually, to condense the story, after Job or Ayub has seemingly moved on from this, God starts giving him things back one by one. And eventually he gets back his property, he gets back everything. And God takes Job on a journey and he shows him, for example, two beasts that are fighting. Is this good or bad? And he takes him on all of this journey and he shows him essentially within the Christian narrative that this, what you perceive to be good and bad, and what you perceive to be punishment and reward, may not be punishment and reward and good and bad in the books of God, in the books of Allah. This is exactly by the way of what the Qur'an says. That is, or Islam says. That is, if you have a really big bank balance, don't think that that's necessarily a reward. In fact, that could be a huge test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which many people may be failing. So these things are what things are not often as they seem. Number one. Now come to the Quran. In Surah Al-Kahf that we've been discussing, the one that we started a few nights ago, where we said Imam Hussein is reciting these verses, and when Imam Hussein is reciting these verses, there's a wisdom as to why he's reciting this in the story of Karbala. Why is he reciting this verse of Ashab al-Kahf? One, we said Ashab al-Kahf were a minority. That is, truth is often with the minority. The Ashab al-Kahf were not a huge number, number one. Number two, ultimately, after 300 years, 309 years, less 9 or 300 years, they eventually showed that their religion was the truth and was established, meaning the truth eventually comes to light. Whether we like it or not, it may take time. Remember Columbus. Columbus was a hero not too long ago. Now we say he's the biggest terrorist in history because the truth has come to light. And maybe other truths will come to light over time. Similarly, in this context, the second story that the Quran comes with, there's another one, but the main three ones, the one is Musa. Musa or Moses, he is this prophet of God who brings the 10 commandments. He has a very high prestigious position in the court of Allah. But God, Allah says to Musa, Musa, go find someone who's more knowledgeable than you. And at that point in time, it gives us a lesson that it doesn't matter how much you know, you think you know, you can always learn more. As we should. I should always be thinking I can learn more, I can read another book, I can learn another thing. You know, I often am baffled that if you tell someone, hey, are you still learning? Are you still reading? They'll say, I did my undergrad. I did my 4 years college 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. I did a master's. But I told you, if you go to your doctor, he says, hey, are you like watching your diet? Are you exercising? Oh, doc, I did that 30 years ago. But apply? You gotta keep doing it so that you're keeping yourself maintained. Similarly, we read and learn at one point in our life, but then we stop over time. We should not. We should constantly be in a state of learning, as I mentioned a couple of nights ago, we should become learning communities. And what learning communities means is there are people with expertise here in different domains. We should invite and leverage that knowledge that people have to learn collectively. When we learn collectively, we're able to benefit collectively. I'll give you an example. This is something about Buffett that many people don't mention. They mention his financial genius. But they don't mention that what he said himself, that the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. But what he says that people don't often mention is, he said that knowledge also compounds like interest. Many people don't take the time to read and learn. The Ahlul Bayt were saying this well before. But sometimes when I give those examples, it doesn't seep in until people say that, oh, this could actually help me in this life in this world. So now, coming to the story of Musa and Khidr, Musa goes and tries to find this person where the two bodies of water meet. And he meets Khidr, and who's still alive till this day. He says, Will you take me as your student, allow me to go on this journey? And he says, yes, very well, but with one condition. That is, you need to make sure that you do not interrupt and question me on what I'm about to do. Well, okay. So when this happens at that point in time, he comes forward and he says, look, they go to a ship, a boat, and Khidr drills a hole in a perfectly good boat. And he says, oh, what did you just do? This is a perfectly good boat. How can you do that? Didn't I tell you? So, yeah, sorry, I apologize. They go to the next one. There was this young man who, again, this could be a majlis in itself as to what the scholars have said as to why, but he ends up killing a young man. Musa gets very upset. Now, some scholars have said that this was, again, the paradigm of good and evil. Allah replaced this child who was causing his parents to become apostates and destroying their lives with a child who became the mother of a girl who became the mother of one prophet or 70 prophets. Whether you accept that or not, that's often one of the things that is given. I don't want to get off on too high of a side tangent. Anyways, The third thing that happens is they come to a town, the townspeople are not very hospitable, and despite them not being very hospitable, Khidr fixes a wall that is dilapidating and breaking and crumbling. So Musa says, hold on, these people weren't the nicest to us, and then now you're fixing the wall, what's going on? Didn't I tell you, you won't interrupt me, you won't question me? And he says, Hada faraqun bayni wa baynik. This is where you go your way, I go my way. He said, but I'll explain to you. He says, the first situation where I drilled the hole in the boat, the reason I did that was because there was a ruler who was usurping and stealing the property and boats that belonged to good people. And so I drilled this hole so that the owner of the boat could just simply fix it and patch it up and go on their day. They could do that. And if the ruler saw this and he saw the hole, he said, leave it, I'll get another one. So number one. Number two, things are not as they seem. Second level, he says this youth was someone who was causing a lot of problems. And although he may have had the opportunity, we say, did he have the opportunity to repent or not? He may not have. God is the judge. Remember, there's different spiritual games. The spiritual game of Ibrahim is different than your spiritual game and my spiritual game. Ibrahim sees a dream to sacrifice his son. He's to act on it. You and I are not to act on it. Remember that. So that there are different spiritual games. The same way there are different business games. Bezos and Gates are playing one game, $100 billion game. You're not playing the $100 billion game. Let's come speak to me afterwards. But you may not be playing that game. And so that game's a different game. And what that requires is something different. It's a different mindset, different worldview, different. So similarly, there are different spiritual games. The game Imam Hussein, I'm saying the word game, but please try to understand the essence of what I'm saying. The spiritual realm in which Imam Hussein was operating is very different than the spiritual realm that you and I are operating. That's why sometimes I get baffled when people say that Bibi Fatima or Imam Hussein will be waiting for us in the gates of heaven. I'm someone who lies and cheats and steals and is greedy, and those people, those astronomical people will be waiting for me. How arrogant. Now, often I know the response is that, look, it's not because we're perfect, it's just because they hold our hand and our take of the whole. We should have something to offer. And Imam Bakr has been very clear about this, that you think that you can just believe in us and go to heaven, you've lost it. So we need to be very pragmatic and practical about, what are the ground realities. So now, at this stage, he says that, look, the third thing, what happened in the third situation? The third situation was, look, there was a wall that belonged to, under it was a treasure that belonged to a pious, righteous man. And this pious, righteous man, his orphan children, this property belonged to them. So I fixed it. What the scholars debate, was it not wealth or was it knowledge? Anyway, when this happened, eventually we realized that things are not always as they seem. Now, again, why the problem of evil? Now we know, and that is this. I was listening to, one time I was driving home from school and I was listening to NPR. You guys get NPR here? The National Public Radio. It's still in America. We're in America. So you get this idea of this. I was listening to the radio. I'll never forget it. There was this couple, a husband and wife, were very wealthy, very affluent. And this was many years ago. They had a child who was born Down syndrome. Now today, I don't know if you know, many children, they do gene tests when their child is in the womb and they check for the possibility of Down syndrome. And many children are unfortunately aborted. It's the harsh reality of the world. But before this was common, many children used to be born. And now stay with me here. So this couple were very affluent and they had built many institutions for other Down syndrome children in the northeast of America, New York and the tri-state area. And look, the interviewer asked one question that I'm sharing with you. And he said that, look, you had this child who was born with Down syndrome. Can I ask you, and it's a tough question, if you were to have this child again, would you want this child to be born with Down syndrome or not? Tough question to ask a parent, right? I'll never forget the answer. The parents, they responded back to the interviewer and said, if it was for the sake of this child, if you ask us if we would want this child to be born with Down syndrome again, for the sake of the child, we would never want that. But if you ask us for our sake, do we want it to happen again? We would say over and over again. What? Why? Why one answer for the child, one answer for you? Tell me, explain. They said, we want an answer for the child because we don't want the child to suffer. That's our child. We don't want our child to suffer. Well, then why another answer for you? It says, because we believe that this child has made us better human beings. This child has opened our hearts. This child has made us softer hearted. This child has been the grace and the blessing in our life that because of this child, if we didn't have this child, the money that we have made in our life, we would spend on yachts and cars and houses and dinners and things that we didn't need. But this gave us a purpose. We used our money to build institutions for other Down syndrome kids in their family. Sometimes we don't know the wisdom of God as to why things may be coming in our life that we call evil. They may be something, as Durant says, and sometimes get tough and we don't wake up. It may be something to jolt us, to wake us up. Not justifying that suffering. That child still has to suffer. There's a divine wisdom at play. That doesn't mean that when there's another layer of this. The final layer, which I'm going to conclude here, is free will and predestination. Many people say, we want God on the problem of evil. Why me? Why me? Why me? I just answered, why me? It may be that Allah is inviting you to go higher. As the poet Iqbal, Allama Iqbal, or Iqbal Lahori, he gives the example of a falcon or Shaheen. As many people know, the poetry of Iqbal had much more impact in Iran than it did even in the subcontinent, because he wrote a lot more in Farsi than he wrote in Urdu. Anyways, he says the falcon, the wind, the turbulence is not to demoralize it and make it go to the ground. The wind that is striking the falcon, the Shaheen, is to invite it to go higher, to go above the altitude. When we go on planes, doesn't that happen? The pilot says, we got to go higher because there's too much turbulence at this altitude. It's not always to bring you down, it's to actually bring you up. So that's why those challenges may be coming in your life. Because if Allah, we say that Allah is punishing the one who's being tested. There's a problem. Why? Because Allah tested the ones He loves the most. All of the prophets, all of the imams. It's not a punishment. Who are we to play God? Anyways, at that point in time, remember, free will and predestination. We want our cake and we want to eat it too. What do I mean? We say, God, solve all the problems of suffering and cancer and all the difficulties that are going in society. Okay, let's say God does it. What happens with my free will? What happens with your free will? So you want to have God solve all the problems, but also you want your free will to be able to say. Because if that was the case, then you would say that, oh God, if you gave me free will, I would have solved the problem. You didn't need to do that. God's saying, look, here, I gave you free will. Are you getting rid of the injustice in your society? Your Louis Vuitton bags that some people have, I don't know if anyone has it here, why doesn't it ever go on sale? What happens to the unsold one that you buy for 5,000 and 10,000? They're burnt. Why? So there's not an aftermarket for it. Is Allah to blame for that waste, or are you to blame for that waste? When you go to Zara and H&M and the likes, they now say we're using it for renewable energy, we're burning these things. In reality, they don't want it to go on sale and there to be an aftermarket issue. For years, people have burnt crops so that the price of crops is controlled. Is Allah to blame for that? Or man? وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. Allah has created risk for every creature on this planet. But when we usurp and we steal and we make sure that we don't do justice, we are to blame, not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same happened on the plains of Karbala. Abul Fawd al-Abbas. This is one say about Abbas. Abbas is called Qamar Banu Hashim. Banu Hashim, in which everyone is the moon. Abbas is called the moon of Banu Hashim. Narrations say that Imam Ali alayhi salam, he asked his brother Aqil, I want you to find me a wife who can give me a strong son to support my son Hussein on the plains of Karbala. Hussein was the apple of the eye of Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'min and Fatima al-Zahra. And Abbas was the apple of the eye of Amir al-Mu'min. They prayed for him. Abbas came into the life and he was always there for the Ahlul Bayt. The narrations say on the 10th of Muharram, Abbas is hearing, he's the flag bearer, the standard bearer, the alamdara, the Lashkar of Imam al-Hussein, the army of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. One after the other people are going at that point in time. Abbas, he hears the cries of the children, al-atash, 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 the thirst, the thirst, the thirst. Abbas can't take it anymore. He says, my master, my Mawla, Imam al-Hussein, let me go towards the battlefield. Some narrations say Imam Hussein says, Abbas, you are my flag bearer, you are my standard bearer, you are my alamdar. How can I let you go towards the battlefield? To which some say Abbas says, my master, where is that army for which I am the flag bearer? Everyone's gone. At that point in time, the cries of al-atash and thirst get louder. Abbas begins to cry. At that point in time, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he says, Abbas, very well, if you are to go, then maybe you can get some water for these children. But Abbas, no, we have not come to fight. The narrations say Abbas is given a spear that Imam Hussein takes and he breaks. He takes the sharp part of it, he puts it away, he takes the other edge and he gives it to Abbas. Abbas realizes that he's not to fight. The one who spent his whole life wanting to fight and defend Islam and the Ahlul Bayt, He's not able to fight. He goes towards the battlefield. When he goes towards the battlefield, Abbas is the one who is able to separate the army and move them in different directions. And he's able to split the army. And this Abbas, he splits the army and he gets to the water. He gets to the Euphrates. He gets to the Al-Qama. And when he gets to the Euphrates, when he gets to the Al-Qama, when he takes the water in his hand, he looks at the hand and he says, Ya nafs min ba'dil Husayn yuhuni. And he begins to recite poetry. And he says, oh nafs, oh soul, will you drink water while your master Hussein is thirsty? He looks at it and Allah knows what he sees in this reflection. He takes the water, he throws it back towards the river. At that point in time, he fills the mashq, he fills the water skin. When he fills it, he takes it and then he goes. When he takes it and he goes at that point in time, he goes on his horse and he's going back with the water skin. When he's going back, the enemy takes aim at one arm of Abbas. They strike the arm of Abbas. His arm, it is cut. He moves the mush to the other hand. They strike the other hand. When they strike the other hand, Abbas moves the mush, the water skin, to his teeth. When he moves it to his teeth, narrations say they took aim for the face of Abbas. They shot an arrow into the eye of Abbas. The skin was pierced. The water began to flow. At that point in time, the enemy began to strike Abbas from every side. He was coming towards the ground. When he came towards the ground, Imam Hussein came running. When Imam Hussein came running, he took his brother in his lap. He says, my brother, what have they done to you, Abbas? What have they done to you, Umm of Banu Hashim? At that point in time, Abbas says, my master, a final request. I'm about to depart. I'm about to leave. May I request one thing? He says, Abbas, tell me. Imam Hussein says, Abbas, tell me. He says, when I came into this world, you were the first one that I saw. When I leave this world, when I depart this world, I wish for you to be the last sight that I see. Then Imam Hussein says, then look at me, Abbas. Why aren't you looking? He says, my master, there is blood in my eye. I can't see. I wouldn't trouble you, but my hands have been severed. My hands have been cut. I cannot do this myself. Ajrukum ala Allah. The narrations say, I will take 1 minute and a half and then I will conclude. The narrations say that Sayyid Mahdi Bahrul Ulum, Sayyid Mahdi Bahrul Ulum was the Marja Azam 300 years ago, the top scholar. He took some of the Shias. They had gone down in the basement under the Dari of Azad Abbas. When they got there, at that point in time, the narrations say they saw the grave of Abul Fadl Abbas, the Zawar. They looked at Sayyid Mahdi. They said, Sayyid Mahdi, can you please answer a question for us? He said, what's the question? They said, we heard Abbas was very tall. He said, yes. Then can you tell me, can you tell us, why is his grave so small? Sayyid Mahdi, he began to beat himself. He began to wail and cry. He said Abbas was very tall, but the enemy cut him into so many pieces. This is all that we have left of Abbas. Final narration. They brought the news to al-Banin. They said, al-Banin, Abbas fought courageously. He fell towards the ground. My young ones, remember, if you have a difficult time, do tawassul to Allah through al-Banin. Recite a Fatiha. I've seen people, young people in London, who've said it's done miracles for them. Why? Because al-Banin gave everything in Karbala, before, during, and after. This mother, they brought the news. They said, your son fought courageously, Abbas. All 4 of your sons fought courageously, but especially Abbas. But how did he fall? al-Banin might have asked, how did my son Abbas fall to the ground? His hands were cut. His hands were severed. What hit the ground first if he didn't have hands to support him? Banin, I would tell you, but I don't know how to. Then what did she might ask, what was it? Is it his face that hit the ground first? His chest hit the ground first? What hit the ground first? Banin, perhaps we don't know. But what one can put together is that it was not the face of Abbas, and it was not the chest of Abbas that hit the ground, but perhaps it was the arrow in the eye of Abul Fadl Abbas that hit the ground. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب الله عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل العباس بن أمين معتم الحسين يا حسين يا حسين 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 حسين
पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली, पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली, पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई इल्तिजा है ये मेरी, कोई प्यासा न करे, शिकवाए कश नलबी, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई मेरे बाबा से ने दूर हटा दो बच्चों, खाली कूदो को कहीं जाके छुपा दो बच्चों, देख कर खुश करने बोला महसूस करे, अपने भाई की कमी, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई काश पानी के लिए उनसे न कहती आकर, क्या खबर थी कि नहीं आएंगे हम लोग जाकर, शर्म आती है मुझे देख कर टूटी कमर, जान गलती है मेरी, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई मुझको एहसास न हो अपने चचा के हम का, इसलिए रोते नहीं सामने मेरे बाबा, जानती हूँ मैं मगर कि मेरे बाबा पर क्या कयामत गुजरी, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली, पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा पास नहीं, पानी मांगे न कोई एक हर मिन सदा दश्त से आई असगर, इतना एहसान तो कर बहन पे भाई असगर। उठ जा बेशीर मेरे, बांध ले सर से कफन, अब जरूरत है तेरी पास बाबा के मेरे, दूसरा पास नहीं। पानी मांगे न कोई, रोके सकीना बोली, पास बाबा के मेरे, दूसरा पास नहीं। पानी मांगे न कोई, इससे ढारस थी तुझे कट गए बाजू के, हीरो तलवार है और तन्हा है बाबा तेरे। आना मुश्किल है वतन, कोई उम्मीद नहीं, कहते सुबह से कोई पास बाबा के मेरे, दूसरा पास नहीं। पानी मांगे न कोई, रोके सकीना बोली, पास बाबा के मेरे, दूसरा पास नहीं। पानी मांगे न कोई। I'll sing, 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 I'll sing. इमरान कहाँ और जिंदान कहाँ, ये बहन पैद हुई तू नाया गाजी, जबरदा सर से छिनी मैं सदा दे रही तू नाया गाजी, जबरदा सर से छिनी मैं सदा दे रही तू नाया अले इमरान कहाँ और जिंदान कहाँ, ये बहन पैद हुई राया गाजी, सर से छिनी मैं सदा दे रही राया गाजी, सर से छिनी मैं सदा दे रही माया हमको पानी न मिले तेरी खुशबू तो रहे, तेरे बाजू न कटे चाहे मशकी साचे दे, ये मगर हो न सका तेरे बाजू है जुदा, मुझ पे है तशनबी नाया गाजी, जबरदा सर से छिनी मैं सदा दे रही नाया गाजी, जबरदा सर से छिनी मैं सदा दे रही नाया गाजी, धूप में टूटा शजर तुझसे आवाज उठा घर, मेरे पर रहना मेरा सर, क्या नहीं तुझको खबर, अलमदार वफा इस बहन को खुदा, तुझसे ढारस थी बड़ी तू नाया गाजी, जबरदा सर से छिनी मैं सदा दे रही तू नाया गाजी, पर्दा सर से चली है सदा देती रही खुदाया आवाज़ी आ गई शाम आलम लुट गए हरम रेत पर चलती हुई हो गया ठंडा आलम पुरसा देने के लिए मुझसे मिलने के लिए आ गए बाली नाया पर्दा सर से चली मैं सदा देखती रही खुदाया पर्दा सर से चली मैं सदा देखती रही खुदाया क्या कहूँ बेरदा हम को लिए ये मुसलमान सारे शहर दर शहर गए खिलकते कूफा कभी खिलकते शाम कभी और हम हंसी सुनाया पर्दा सर से चली मैं सदा देखती रही खुदाया पर्दा सर से चली मैं सदा देखती रही खुदाया कितनी बेवकूफ थी बहन शहंशाह वफा नाम ले के मेरा जब ये जालिम ने कहा नाज था जिस पे तुझे अब बुलाओ ना उसे और मैं रोती रही खुदाया पर्दा सर से चली मैं सदा देखती रही खुदाया पर्दा सर से चली मैं सदा देखती रही खुदाया में क़ज़ा जब सकीना को मिली लेके कुर्ते का कफन बच्ची दफनाई गई बड़ी नाम तेरा सूरत नारे अली दुख में दोहराती रही खुदाया पर्दा सर से चली मैं सदा देखती रही खुदाया पर्दा सर से चली मैं सदा देखती रही खुदाया Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
این چه شورش است که در خلق عالم است باز این چه شورش است باز این چه شورش است که در خلق عالم است باز این چه نوحه و چه عذاب و چه ماتم است باز این چه نوحه و چه عذاب و چه ماتم است باز این چه شورش است باز این چه شورش است که در خلق عالم است باز این چه شورش است باز این چه شورش است که در
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير الأمل حي على خير الأمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأتعود. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربي صل على محمد وآله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآله بحول الله وقوته يقوم ويقعود. الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد. الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآله. استغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. استغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك أعظم من كل بلية الرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just to let you know about the program this the rest of the evening today. After Isha, then we'll have a break for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So give you a chance to refresh yourself, and then we'll convene here I would say probably about 9:50 p.m. Also, okay? Be here for about 40, 45 minutes or so. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن علي ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله صلاة العشاء الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته نتوب ونرجعون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب ربي ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته يقوم الواقعون الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد يا ولي العافية نسألك العافية في الدنيا والآخرة الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي والذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد اللهم صل على محمد اللهم صل على محمد
الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب
اللهم صل على محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إنه ليس لعلم الموت وإنما أطلبه بقطرات أجول في طلبه البلدان فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالخير لا أدري في سهل هو أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في أرض أم في بحر وعلى يدي من ومن قبلي فقد علمت أنه لك وأسبابه بيدي أنت الذي تغسله وتسبح برحمتك اللهم صل على محمد واجعل يا ربي رحمته واسعا ومطلبه سهلا ومقصده قريبا ولا تعللي بالحكم بما لم تقل فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك وصل على محمد وآله وجد على عبدك في قبرك
Sisters and brothers, as we complete our prayers this evening, let us remember those people who are less fortunate, who are in hospitals, at home recovering. who are languishing in prisons, those who are stuck in conflict zones or displaced, refugee camps, people who are enduring economic hardship. Let us all together pray. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allah yujibu al-mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. This brothers are requested to offer Surah Al-Fatiha for the sponsors for the Tabarruk tonight, Sister Sabra and Brother Iqbal Rizvi, Sister Batul and Brother Nadia Rabbani, Sister Tanzila, Brother Binas Merchant for the Isali Sawab of the family members. And also tonight is the anniversary of Marhum Muhammad Abbas Merali and Sister Tanzila's mom, who passed away on this day 2 years ago. And also let's remember those people who lost their lives today, innocent people in Afghanistan, also in Gaza, all the Marumins, supporters of our Muharram programs, and all our friends and family. Al-Fatiha.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين سيدا وصيا. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر اللحد مني زيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامي وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك. رحمة الله وبركاته.
So, brothers and sisters, we'll take about a 15-minute break right now. So we will be back here at 9:55. Okay, 9:55. We'll start our Q&A session. Please enjoy yourself with the refreshments. Thank you.
The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. Betrayal by the Kufans set this moon on its course, calling out for their guide. Treachery with no remorse, Muslim and his sons. What a tragedy, oh what calamity. The moon bleeds to foresee, the moon bleeds to foresee. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. On the 9th it heard the prayers of those pure souls, fought the rising sun for. Perhaps this could be its role. Akbar's azan so clear, this moon filled with fear. How will it possibly arise and see the state of those dear, and see the state of those dear? The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. It saw the 6-month infant, no water but an arrow. That night it shone its light on Rabab, filled with such sorrow. To see my asghar I crave, I hear nothing but his cries. Oh son, please do not arise. And with this mother sympathize, and with this mother sympathize. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. Witnessed it the trampling on Sham-e-Ghariba, saw that night the terror, bodies scattered afar, tents looted and on fire, earrings snatched from Ruqayyah. This moon also in such pains, this household bound in chains, this household bound in chains. The moon of Muharram, times of sadness have come. The crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala. From this month my baby had to wander veilless. Zahra's grave is restless for her daughter princess, the cloak of purity. For this mother so holy, the beloved of Fatima, paraded in the bazaar, paraded in the bazaar. the moon of Muharram. Times of sadness have come, the crescent has now arrived, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala, casting gloom on Karbala.